My sister laughed the way a storm laughs before it breaks. I heard it from across the room, and something inside me went cold. My daughter sits by the window with her favorite blanket wrapped around her legs, and she watches the street, like she is waiting for a miracle. She cannot walk without help. She has always been small and brave, and she has the kind of smile that could stop a whole room from arguing. I thought family would protect that smile. I thought my sister would be the first one to shield it. Instead, she turned my little girl into a joke. It began as whispers and eye rolls. It became a show. At family gatherings, she would lean forward and mimic the way my daughter moves. She would call her names that sounded like laughter and then clap as if she had told a clever joke. People who did not know any better would chuckle because my sister made it sound light and harmless. I watched my daughter shrink under the noise. She would fold her hands tighter. She would look at her feet and hum to herself to steady the tremor in her voice. I remember the first time I told my sister to stop. Her face changed for a second. Then she shrugged and said it was only a bit of fun. She said I took everything too seriously. She said we needed to laugh more. I watched the life leave my daughter a little more each time my sister had the room. I found myself making excuses for my own anger. I told myself she would grow out of it. I told myself my sister was cruel in small ways, but she loved us in the big moments. I told myself so many things to buy the illusion that our family was intact. The truth is that cruelty wears a slow, steady mask. It steps in small. It wedges itself into the pattern of everyday living until you cannot see where kindness ends and mockery begins. My daughter began to withdraw. She stopped asking for the things she loved. She stopped painting on the kitchen counter. She stopped singing in the car. I tried to reach her, and she would smile the way someone smiles when they are deciding to hide a bruise. I began to watch my sister through a new lens. I stopped joining her laughter. I stopped sitting at the table when she came to visit. The rest of the family noticed. They said we were being dramatic. They said I was making a mountain out of a molehill. None of them ever saw my daughter when she crawled into my lap at night and pressed her forehead to mine. None of them saw how she would tremble with fear when footsteps came down the hallway. None of them understood why I began to keep a list. I never showed anyone that list. I wrote it in a small notebook, and I wrote it like a litany. Each line a moment. Each line a small betrayal. The list was not only for memory. It was for breathing. It was the way I kept myself sane while inside I burned. I wrote the day she pretended my daughter could not hear the radio. I wrote the night she told a room full of people that my daughter had been ruined by me. I wrote the morning she blocked the ramp and laughed when my daughter could not make it through the door. I wrote the names of witnesses. I wrote the time of day. I wrote the place. I wrote until the page folded itself under the weight of what had been done. The turning point came when my sister crossed a line I had not thought she could cross. It was a Sunday in late autumn, and the house smelled like stew and wool. My daughter had been excited to see her cousin. She had chosen a dress with little stars on it, and she had braided her hair with careful hands. She wanted to bake cookies with me. My sister arrived with a grin that belongs to a person who thinks they own the room. She sat at the kitchen table, and she did not even bother to hide the way she watched my daughter. Then she started. She made noises that mimicked my daughter's movements. She imitated the way my daughter lifted her hand. She raised her voice and pushed the joke into spectacle. People laughed and the sound dug into me. I stood up and I told her to stop. My voice shook. I told her that she was hurting my child. The laughter turned awkward for a second. Then my sister stood and she walked over to the stove like nothing had happened. She said she was being playful. She said my daughter was too sensitive. She said I was making a scene to be seen. The room closed around me. My daughter looked at me like she was searching for the map to how to be safe. I felt a rage that was not clean. It was not noble. It roared and then it refined itself into a plan. I did not want to be a broken instrument of revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted my daughter to know that someone had seen her and that someone had acted. I began to record. I bought a small camera that fit in a plant on the porch. I set it to the corner of the room where my sister liked to make her performances. I told myself it would be enough to show the truth. It felt like a betrayal at first. I told myself I was becoming like the people who hide behind screens. Then I thought of my daughter folding her hands tighter. I thought of the way she stopped asking to go out to the park. The recorder became my witness. The first clips were small. My sister mimicking the way my daughter moved. My sister saying that children like my daughter make everyone uncomfortable, so they must be laughed at. My sister telling people that my daughter was a burden and that I had failed her. The worst was how light she sounded while she said it. The camera caught her smile as clearly as it caught my daughter's face draining of color. I showed the footage to my husband, and at first he did not want to watch. He told me to be careful. Then he sat. He watched and his face broke like glass. He could not deny what he had seen. He watched my sister expose our child as if she were a punchline. He watched the casual cruelty. He watched the way other family members leaned forward and let the laughter swallow the goodness. He felt anger and then he felt something sharper. He felt the need to act. We went to the local support group for parents of children with special needs. We told our story. We sat in a coffee shop with people who knew the cost of small cruelties. They did not tell us to forgive quickly. They did not tell us to ignore it. They told us to protect our child and to document everything. They gave us names of advocates and they told us how to approach the school and the community. The word advocate sounded official and cold and exactly what we needed. I learned how to write an incident report. I learned how to frame my words so that they could not be twisted into something else. I learned how to file complaints that would be recorded and taken seriously. My sister noticed a change in me. She noticed that I stopped smiling like forgiveness was automatic. She noticed that I was not available for the usual small gatherings. She texted me a message that said we should talk and that she missed the old days. I read it, and the paper it felt like had nothing in it but air. I called her and she said she wanted to make amends. Her voice was smooth. I could hear the practiced softness in it. I told her I wanted her to meet my daughter in a place where there were witnesses. I wanted the apology to be on record. I wanted to see if she could look at my child and say the words she had used. She agreed. The meeting was set at a cafe that had a table near the window and a staff that kept polite distance. My daughter came with me, and she sat poised and small and brave as always. My sister arrived with the same grin that had become a shield for her cruelty. I watched her approach the table like an actor stepping onto a stage. She reached out and she placed a cup of tea in front of me with hands that pretended to be steady. She said she was sorry. The words were soft, but they were empty. She said it in a way that sounded rehearsed. My daughter looked at her, and then the room seemed to tilt. My daughter spoke with a voice that was like the beginning of dawn. She asked my sister why she made fun of her. The cafe seemed to hush. My sister faltered, and then she chuckled as if the question was absurd. She said it was nothing. She said my daughter should not be so serious. The waitress pretended not to notice the tension. I felt something inside me break open. The years of small wounds poured out like rain. I looked at my sister and I said that it was not nothing. I told her about the nights my daughter cried into her pillow. I told her about the school visits we had to prepare for. I told her that mocking a child is not harmless and that it leaves marks that are invisible but real. My sister's face did not pale yet. She only searched for a way to make the spotlight on herself. She tried to turn the story back to me. She asked why I had filmed her. She asked why I had turned this into evidence. She tried to make it about my cruelty to her. The waitress cleared her throat, and I realized we had built the wrong stage. I had hoped my sister would confess and then feel the weight of what she had done. She did not. She attempted to dance around the facts, and then she left the cafe in a small huff. My daughter watched her go, and then she hugged my hand like it was a lifeline. That night, I could not sleep. The plan that had been forming in the hard places of my heart became clearer. I wanted something that would not be brushed away. I wanted accountability, and I wanted it to be undeniable. I began to gather the pieces that would prove pattern and intent. I collected messages where my sister had joked about my daughter. I saved videos where she had turned cruelty into entertainment. I reached out to neighbors. I asked if anyone had seen the way she behaved at block parties and at charity events. A few people remembered, and they were kind enough to write statements. They said they had seen her mock my daughter and that they had felt uncomfortable. They admitted they had not acted then. They admitted they had laughed when they should have protected. Their courage in admitting their silence inflamed me to move forward. I took the evidence to a local advocate who had helped other families. She listened without interruption, and then she folded her hands and told me the truth. She said we had to involve authorities. She said that mocking a child with a disability in a way that caused emotional harm crossed lines that could be enforced. She explained how to present the case and how to make sure it would be seen as a pattern rather than a single bad day. The idea of calling the police felt huge and frightening. I had always imagined justice as something that could be quiet and private. I worried about the fallout for my family. I worried about how my parents would react and about whether my sister would retaliate. But then I thought of my daughter losing her voice, and I thought about the nights she pressed her forehead against mine, and I remembered the way she stopped singing in the car. Nothing felt bigger than the need to protect her. I made the call to the advocate, and we set the next steps. I felt fear like an animal under the bed. I also felt a curious sharpness like the air before a cut crystal breaks. I understood that the life of a family can change with a single decision. I understood that some things had to be exposed to be healed. The next morning, I took my daughter to the park and we swung until the sky blurred into blue. She laughed in small bursts and I watched her trust the world again for a moment. I wanted to give her the best of myself before I stepped into the long fight ahead. I kissed her forehead and I promised her that I would make the world safer for her in any way I could. I promised her that no one would make her pain into a punchline and that I would stand with her like a wall. I held that promise like a weapon and like a shield. I had no idea what the consequences would be. I only knew what had to be done. The camera files were backed up and labeled. The witness statements were scanned. The advocate arranged a meeting with a community liaison and a representative from the local school, and together we prepared a complaint that was calm and precise and impossible to ignore. I remember the morning we filed the paperwork. The office smelled of coffee and paper. The clerk stamped our forms with a heavy hand. I left the building feeling both weightless and weighted. My sister would be notified. The wheels of consequence had been set in motion. I thought about what she would do when the letters came. I thought about the way some people double down and the way some people fold. I rehearsed the images in my head of her standing before an explanation and finding none. I did not sleep that night. I held my daughter and I whispered to her what I hoped our actions would bring. I told her that sometimes justice is a slow, careful thing, and sometimes it is sharp and loud. I told her that we would choose the path that kept her safe. I did not tell her that fear lived in me like a second heartbeat. I only told her that I loved her beyond measure and that I would not let her be used as entertainment. The week after we filed the complaint, my sister called. Her voice was clipped like someone trying to hide a tremor. She said she wanted to talk and that she had been misunderstood. I listened and I let her speak. She blamed stress. She blamed misunderstanding. She blamed everything but herself. I asked her if she remembered the last time she had mocked my daughter. She hesitated and then said she did not. Her memory was polite and selective. She tried to make it into a story where everyone misunderstood a joke. I told her I had recordings and witness statements. I told her I had given the complaint to the school and to community services. I told her that the process had begun. She made a sound that was neither apology nor denial. Then she said she would come over to our house. I did not invite her. I told her I was not ready. The call ended, and I felt something close to relief. I was not eager for confrontation. I was eager for the slow exactness of a system that could fold a pattern into evidence.